Welcome back to Inside the Game with CNHI Sports. I'm George Bremer of CNHI Sports Indiana, and this week let's get started with college basketball. March is almost here, so let's check in with Big Ten Country with Elton Hayes and Kevin Brockway. Now it's time to check in with Big Ten Country. We've got Elton Hayes of CNHI Sports Pennsylvania, Kevin Brockway of CNHI Sports Indiana. Kevin, I want to start with you. You did the notebook this week talking about the bubble teams in the Big Ten. The one that comes to mind probably first and foremost right now is Michigan State. Just upset Illinois. Looks like the Spartans have a little bit of a heartbeat. Can they do enough to keep that NCAA tournament alive for Tom Izzo?
Yeah, it's still a brutal stretch, George, if you look at it, because while that was a big win, you've got Ohio State coming up on Thursday night. Then you're at Maryland, a team that's playing very well. Then a rematch with Indiana, and then 2 games against Michigan to close the season. So it's going to be a difficult task. But the one thing I'll say is Tom Izzo has them playing hard. I think the second half of that Michigan State game, I covered the Indiana-Michigan State game last Saturday. And the first half, they looked dead in the water. They turned the ball over 7 times in the first 7 minutes. Weren't shooting well, looked like a mess offensively. But Indiana could not take advantage. In the second half, Michigan State really came through. Aaron Henry, the Indianapolis native, with some great offense, and Gabe Brown off the bench, too, hit a bunch of timely threes. So Michigan State is breathing, but it's going to be a tough road ahead.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's a grueling finish. The conference is tough for everybody, but when you've got that kind of a finish coming up, that's particularly hard. Elton, out your way, not necessarily your team, but on that side of the country, Rutgers starting kind of fits and starts right now for the Scarlet Knights. I know they're trying to get that huge slump, getting the NCAA tournament the first time in a long time. It looks like they're close. Do you think they can finish the job and get into the big dance?
I think so. They're playing. They definitely look like a improved team. Steve Pikiell has them playing really well. This is a team that, just a year ago, it seems like a decade ago, but just a year ago, Rutgers was playing just as well as anyone in the Big Ten, and was poised to make its first tournament run in a while. I think that they're playing well right now. They seem to have hit their stride. And as we know with college basketball, timing is everything. And if they can kind of harness some of that momentum, close out the season, with on a positive note, and head into the Big Ten championship or Big Ten tournament rather, and get a couple of wins, I think they could be dancing. The one thing that the Big Ten has going for it this season is that national perception is so high in the league that a team like Rutgers, which may be on the fringes, might get the benefit of the doubt due to the level of competition that it faces every other night here in the conference play.
Kevin, Rutgers' upcoming opponent tonight, actually, as we're filming, is Indiana. You're very well familiar with the Hoosiers, of course. They're going in the other direction. That upset loss to Michigan State seemed to really hurt them. And where do you think the Hoosiers are, and how desperate are they in this NCAA tournament search?
Yeah, a tremendously tough road ahead for them as well. And you've got 4 games and 3 of the last 4 on the road. But if there's any solace in anything, Indiana has seemed to play better on the road than they have at home this season. 6-5 at Assembly Hall. They do have a game with Michigan on Saturday that's going to be tremendously difficult. But the game with Rutgers tonight, and then the following week at Michigan State, which we mentioned before is playing better, and at Purdue, a team that they can't seem to beat under Archie Miller, losing the last 7-8 meetings between the two schools. So it's going to be a tough road ahead for Indiana, and they're going to have to figure out some consistency. But if they can win 2 of the last 4, I think they'll still sneak in the NCAA tournament.
And Elton, I know one team that you've been talking about off and on throughout the season. A few weeks ago, you said they were one of your bigger disappointments. Minnesota, still in that mix. Seems like they're a very, very good team at home. Can't get things solved on the road. What do you make of the Golden Gophers?
Well, I think if the Golden Gophers want to go dancing, maybe they can switch the Big Ten tournament up to Minnesota, because like you said, they are a different team on the road, a different team. That's not going to do many favors in this conference. I mentioned earlier about Rutgers getting the benefit of the doubt, but Rutgers, seems to, there doesn't seem to be that much of a difference between Rutgers at home on the road. A team like Minnesota, when they look like a completely different team on the road, I don't know if it's going to cut it. It's competitive this year, and every win counts. I'm not sure Minnesota, they missed Daniel Laturu a lot this year. Marcus Carr's playing well, but I think they're really showing the effects of not having a guy like Daniel Laturu in that lineup, and it's hurting them. I'd be surprised if Minnesota is one of those teams that gets in on the bubble.
Yeah, and Kevin, finally, the other bubble team near and dear to Elton's heart, his alma mater, the Maryland Terrapins, right now struggling early in the year, but quietly one of the hotter teams in the conference. Are they making a move? Are they a real NCAA threat right now?
Yeah, and they've got a favorable schedule down the stretch too, which I think helps. But the one thing you have to give Mark Turgeon a lot of credit. Maybe a dark horse candidate for Coach of the Year in the Big Ten, considering they lost Jalen Smith and Anthony Cowan, two of their best players. And watching them early in the season playing against Indiana, looked like they had a lot of issues, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. They've shored that up and really are playing good team basketball, really together. And I think that bodes well down the stretch. And I think they're definitely going to be a team that's going to find itself on the right side of the bubble come Selection Sunday.
Elton, the team you cover, Penn State, probably had their bubble burst a couple weeks ago with a loss to Nebraska. The big question out there all year has been Jim Ferry's status. Is he done? Does it look like they're going to go in a different direction with the Nittany Lions?
I would be surprised if he's, at the Bryce Jordan Center next season. I'm not sure this really means much of anything, but last week Penn State officially posted the men's head coaching listing to its website. Formality, I'm sure, but if you all are interested in throwing your name in the ring, you have to have a 4-year degree and some type of coaching experience. So, I think Ferry. It's hard to, you watch this team and it's frustrating to see that they just cannot play consistently. They got a win last night, a 3-point win at Nebraska, which was, Jim Ferry was saying it was good to see them finally put it together and not have one of these, we let it get away from us again. But, I think his time in State College has come to an end. It's unfortunate because, he didn't ask to be put in this position. He was an assistant under Pat Chambers. They brought him in to kind of reinvigorate the offense 4 years ago. He seems to have done that, but asking him to not only come in a month before the start of the season and, have that interim tag placed on you, but to lose a guy like Lamar Stevens, who's doing well for Cleveland. He had a game-winning bucket last night. A guy like Mike Watkins was just a force and a presence down low on the post. Asking him to kind of steady the ship, this year without having those players, and then doing so, you got to think of the psychological loss or the psychological impact that a lot of these players who loved Pat Chambers, who were planning on playing for him this year, kind of had the rug taken on, pulled out from underneath them. So, I do not envy Jim Ferry. I think he's done well with what he's been handed and the situation he's inherited, and he'll find his footing somewhere. But I just don't think it's going to be at Penn State as head coach next season.
Yeah, it's kind of a rough run there. A tough task, no doubt, for Ferry and the Nittany Lions. Kevin, before we go here a little bit, football season starting to creep back into the picture. Spring practice starting in a couple of weeks in Indiana. Big question for the Hoosiers is Michael Penix. Obviously tore his ACL, second time in 3 years. He's been such an outstanding player, such a big part of that team's run and surprising season. Where does he stand, and how confident are they're going to have a 100% healthy quarterback in September?
Well, we've been told in the rehab process, good days and bad days. He's still not running and throwing yet, but it's about 4 weeks in. But he seems pretty optimistic and very upbeat and willing to put the work in. And there is hope that he'll be throwing by the summer, and we'll be ready for that opener September 4th against Iowa. So we'll see, but the early returns are promising for him to make a full recovery from this.
Now, I know Penn State hasn't set that spring schedule yet, but what are you looking for this spring when the Lions do start to get on the field?
3 new coaches. Ty Howell was promoted from offensive analyst. He played football here, in 2000. I think he graduated in 2013. He was named tight ends coach after Tyler Bowman was named tight ends coach in the NFL at Urban Meyer's Jacksonville Jaguars. Mike Yursich, a new offensive coordinator. And today, Penn State officially named former Purdue assistant Anthony Poindexter as new co-defensive coordinator and safeties coach after Tim Banks last week headed down to Tennessee as defensive coordinator. We talk about consistency being important for these players, getting on the field in the spring and kind of meshing, getting that, just that on the field instruction. It's big for the coaches too. Granted, Penn State doesn't have 4 coaches it's replacing like it did last year. 3 is still a substantial number. We spoke with Ty Howell, I believe it was yesterday, and he was saying one thing that he's thankful for was, he was on staff as an offensive analyst last year, so he's familiar with the faces in the room, with the program. But I think the big question here at Penn State is, will they get a full spring to get these coaches acclimated and adjusted? Because as we saw last year with first-year offense coordinator Kirk Shiraka, who lasted 1 season up here, not having that spring of offense or spring practice with the offense really impacted that slow start of the season before they really started to catch on and turn it, put it all together in that second half. So people are just, I guess, hoping COVID stays at bay. The numbers have been promising in terms of, the cases going down or just kind of, stabilizing. So if that remains the same and Penn State's new coaching staff and players can have a full spring together, then I think there'll be a lot of optimism heading into the fall.
Absolutely. Definitely looking forward to getting things back on track in the sports world. March right around the corner, conference tournaments around the way, and then the big dance. I'm sure you guys are going to have plenty to talk about in the weeks to come. Thanks a lot for your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.
You all take care.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Elton and Kevin for their time. You can follow Elton's coverage of the Penn State Nittany Lions at EHDC12. You can follow Kevin and the Indiana Hoosiers at Kevin Brockway G1. Now let's get a national perspective and check in with Clay Horning of CNHI Sports Oklahoma. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Clay Horning. And Clay, we talked a little bit throughout these 20, I guess this is the 23rd episode, about Gonzaga and how they're kind of quietly going through this perfect season out there. A lot of people paying as much attention as you expect for such a huge accomplishment. Now you're getting them very close to being an undefeated team going into the NCAA tournament. They'll be chasing the first undefeated season since the 1975-76 Indiana Hoosiers, and they'll be doing it in Indiana. What have you got about the Bulldogs, and what do you think of this quest they're on?
Well, I think it's pretty cool, and as we just were talking about it amongst ourselves, you wonder if, should they do it, it will even register in the national consciousness. The entire tournament is taking place in Indianapolis, which I'm sure it will register in the state of Indiana and the state of Washington, but you don't know about the rest of the country. But sort of what I'm getting at, and something I'm trying to finish up today, is that if they do it, it'll just be great on so many levels, and I'll give you a couple of them. One, they're not doing it with the Kentucky model, which I hate, and Kentucky almost did it. I think it was 2015 with 3 freshmen that went in the top 13 picks in the draft and 1 sophomore who was a top 10 pick. And so they will not do it with the Calipari model of, hey, you're going to be in the pros next season. Come here and play with others. They're going to be in the season. Just find abominable, and I hate about college basketball, so they won't do it with that model. They also won't do it with sort of the historic model. You mentioned that 76, 75 Bob Knight team. Kent Benson was a junior on that team. He was the number 1 pick in his draft. Quinn Buckner was on that team. He was a senior, and so was Scott May, who was a National Player of the Year. And I think May went, it's in my column, but I think May went 2nd and Buckner went like 6th. So you had 3 of the top 10 picks, not all the same draft, 2 drafts. You go back further. You go to, well, if you go back further, you have to go to Wooden at UCLA. Well, they were unbeaten in 72 and 73. Bill Walton is their center. Jamal Wilkes is on that team. A guy named Swin Nader, who I remember from childhood, was on that team. Henry Bibby was the senior captain on the 72 team. And a guy named Dave Meyer, who is not in my brain, was the number 2 pick in the 75 draft and was on the 73 team. He wound up, I found this out since, he wound up getting traded from the Lakers right after the draft in Milwaukee for the trade that brought Abdul-Jabbar to Los Angeles. And then he was all Wooden also had a perfect team in '67, featured Kareem, Lou Alcindor at the time. Lucius Allen was on that team as well. And in '64, he had a perfect season as well. And not a lot of people may remember Gail Goodrich, but he was an all-pro. Pretty sure he played in the same backcourt with Jerry West. And Walt Hazzard was on that team. And I can't tell you much about 57 North Carolina State, except that Billy Cunningham, the old 76er coach, was on that team. So what I am getting at is these perfect season unbeaten national champions. They typically had 2 or 3, usually 3 of like the 10 best college players in the country. And for what it's worth, where you go in the draft is not necessarily, where you fall in the college basketball hierarchy. For instance, playing for Gonzaga right now is Jalen Suggs, who's in as high as number 2 I've seen in mock drafts. But he's number 3 on the team in scoring, number 2 on the team in assists, number 3 or 4 on the team in rebounding. He may be a great talent, but he's the number 3 guy on his team right now. And the center, Drew Timm, who's averaging 19.1 points, and probably their best player, is projected to be a late second-round pick. So they're sort of doing it with a bunch of guys averaging between 14 and 20 points. And between them, they're averaging more than 93 as a team, which reminds you of 92 or 91 UNLV, which averaged 97 as a team, and was the last, I think, team that really had the national imagination watching it. And I think maybe the best college basketball team I've ever seen, though they didn't win a championship. So it's amazing on just so many. It's really cool on so many levels. It's just sort of a shame that we're in the middle of the pandemic, and beyond that college basketball just doesn't carry the gravity that it did. I think it might be the greatest victim of the NBA and the NFL taking over the world, which is to say ESPN pushing the NBA and the NFL to take over the world, which I think is unfortunate. So, yeah.
There's no doubt. It definitely held a much higher place. Usually every March, though, they get a little bit bigger stage, and hopefully that'll be the case again. I think Gonzaga will definitely put a unique spin on this year's tournament, if nothing else. Speaking of unique, you have a unique background behind you right now. Do you want to talk a little bit, tell people where you are and the story that you're covering right now?
Sure. And it's like I've already tweeted it out. I don't know if I've got the times on my fingers, but there is a swimmer from Norman, Oklahoma, where my day job is. And his name is Aiden Hayes, and he's a senior, and he is the number 1 recruit in the nation. They actually have swimming recruiting websites if you want to go and find them. He's headed to North Carolina State, but he has today set Oklahoma State records in the 100 freestyle, the 50 freestyle. These are yards, the indoor lengths. 100-yard freestyle, 50-yard freestyle, and the 100-yard butterfly. His best event is probably the 100 butterfly. That is the one that, although I think he's in 2 races at the upcoming Olympic trials in Omaha, so he could be an Olympian. His best time in the 200 fly, which escapes me now, is 8 seconds off the 100 fly. Is that right? Yeah, the 100 fly is 8 seconds off the world record, and the second best turned in by an American in the last 12 months when he ran it, and he ran it about 2 months ago. And let's see if there's anything else I had something else about him. Oh, yeah, is that in the story, I did a 1,500-word feature on him in this morning's paper, and he and in it I found a video of him running I think it was a 50 fly or something. It was up and back once. So 50 fly, and he needed 5 strokes to get to the far end, and he needed 6 strokes to come back. Therefore, covering a majority of his distance underwater off the diving in and the pushing off the wall. And today, in the 100 fly, his first trip up, he did in 4 strokes, and his trip back, he did in 5. So it's just, he's a prodigy, and he works like mad, and you will hear about him. And I think it's in the 100 fly that he broke Michael Phelps' 15, 16-year-old American or world record some time ago. It's hard to keep it all straight. Although, if you enjoy my national columns, do a search for Clay Horning, Aiden, A-I-D-E-N, Hayes, and you can find that mammoth feature. So yeah, it's I would say, I'll bet you'll concur, it's for stories like that kid. Sometimes they're in the sports that everybody follows: baseball, basketball, football. They don't really follow baseball, basketball, football. And sometimes it's in the off sports like swimming or soccer or volleyball, where you just have these fantastic kids with fantastic stories. And that's why I'm in Tulsa today and will be here tomorrow covering it. It's why we do it, for cool stuff like this.
Absolutely. We had a diver here, Mary Beth Dunhay, went to the Olympics. One of the most fun kids that I had a chance to cover. And no doubt about it. Sounds like this is somebody we're going to be hearing about in the very near future. So you heard it here first.
That's right.
Breaking news here on Inside the Game.
Yeah, this is like the internet equivalent of Sports Illustrated's Faces in the Crowd.
Exactly.
When we were growing up. So yeah, you heard it here first. Aiden Hayes, Norman North High School.
Well, thanks a lot for that this week, Clay. And I know there's a lot of busy stuff going on. We'll get to Tiger Woods maybe next week. Hopefully we'll have a little better picture of what's happened with them. And, we're getting into March. There should be plenty to cover. Thanks a lot for your time. Good luck with the swimming state finals.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate it. See you next week.
Thanks again to our national columnist. You can follow him on Twitter at Clay Horning. Now let's check in on the NFL offseason. We'll go to Boston and talk with Bill Burt. Now it's time for our weekly spot with Bill Burt. And ordinarily, Bill, the combine would be here in Indianapolis right now. There'd be all kinds of rumors flying about free agents, draft situations. Of course, the 1 year it's actually nice. It's about 50 degrees here. There's no combine to be had. Obviously, one of the many COVID victims of this year. How do you think not having a combine, not having that sort of informal contact between agents and front offices, how do you think that will affect this offseason in the NFL?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Obviously doing your homework is different than it used to be, because what we saw a lot of was, first of all, players got to be released. Veterans have to be released. So you weren't inviting players in or meeting with agents really until all that process. I know that process would be starting. I know in New England, Bill Belichick is famous for bringing in guys, flying them in and working them out quietly, undercover. And so it's going to take a lot of video, meaning video that they watch during the year and said, wow, that guy looks good. And maybe talk to him briefly, this said player. But it's definitely going to change. Look, we're getting a feeling that in some respects that we're getting through this maybe a little quicker than first thought, which means, then maybe April, right? Knock on wood, maybe April. And then maybe visits could happen, open up weight rooms, open up facilities. So I feel like we're getting closer to that. Now, I'm an optimist. I battle a lot of people who say, no, it's, Fauci says, November of 2023. All right, I get it. But I feel like we're moving in a direction where I think the NFL is going to be told, look, let's hang close another 2 months, and then we will open things up, allow you guys to do more per se, maybe not open things up completely. But, the testing is hot right now. I'm going to be the vaccine. I'm going to be vaccinated this Friday. So I just went to visit my mom today. She's 82. She's been vaccinated. So we seem to be in a better place. That's good for us That's good. I mean, what's hurting right now is this is a big cash cow for Indianapolis. This is like the best meat market of all meat markets is the combine, which has turned into, I don't know how, I can't say it's not important, but this is, I think, where you steal those 4th and 5th rounders, and then maybe that 2nd rounder becomes a middle 1st rounder. And that's the only part. That's where, if, again, you do your homework, you can steal the guy in the 4th round or 6th round instead of this, where everyone sees the guys. Because I know Belichick has said this before, and Parcells said it too. You like to see these guys in person. It's a big difference. They drafted a few guys over the years without seeing guys, and that's not happened recently, but in the past years, the guy comes in and you go, whoa, he's smaller than I thought, or he's bigger than I thought. And so we're in a really strange place. And I feel bad for Indianapolis because that's a great trip. I've been down there for the combine. It's really a lot of fun. And it feels like it's like the beginning of spring training almost in baseball, where hope springs eternal. Everyone's a superstar. Everyone's got a chance to prove themselves. There's a lot of positive vibes down there.
No, yeah, it's great always to get into the room and see all the college athletes, the guys who've been on TV. Like you said, I know the teams do it, and I think we do it in the media too. You walk up to a podium and, wow, that guy's a lot bigger than I thought, or that guy's a lot smaller than I thought. And I know one of the biggest things the teams are missing is that medical eval. One of the reasons it's here in Indianapolis is it's so easy to get to the hospitals. Everything's so tight together there downtown. They all get that one sheet from the same doctor. That's not happening this year either. Right. You mentioned it earlier. Teams have really got to do their homework. Is this going to be an offseason, at least as long as it stays like this, where the front offices that kind of have the better talent evaluators are going to rise to the top?
Absolutely. And, again, if this process goes for several months, we're going to go back to coaching and quarterbacks are going to be number one and number one and 1A. And because talent is important. Let's be honest. But it's that's what I'm missing. I'm not a big. I don't live by quote unquote the pro days. But look, Julian Edelman would probably not be playing in the NFL if it wasn't for a pro day. He wasn't invited to Indianapolis to go to the combine. He ends up running, the shuttle drills and had the best time of anyone that year at the combine. And that shook said, hey, run that again, Julian. He did it faster than he did it before. So the Patriots quietly said, okay, we're going to keep that quiet and we're going to draft you in the 7th round. And so my point is that those kinds of things, and that's where the elite evaluators come from, that we're going to miss that. And you don't really know because, guys are drafted and they play and some of them work out. That's typical. But those diamonds in the rough, which is they're hard to find anyway. And there's luck involved. But going the extra yard, it's harder to go the extra yard unless you mean looking at video and calling coaches, which I'm not saying that doesn't work. I know Bill Belichick's got the red phone right to Saban in Alabama. I mean, now Bill O'Brien's the offensive coordinator. I'm sure the Patriots are getting some good intel on Alabama players on and off the field.
Does that make you more likely to lean that Mac Jones situation? I know that's the hottest rumor around the NFL, that the Patriots at 15 may go with Mac Jones. All these connections adding together, does it make you even lean heavier into that kind of a prediction?
I don't know what Saban is saying to Belichick. If Saban says, Bill, I've had him now for 2 years, he's good, but I think he's more of an 8-8 guy. Or Bill, he's only played a year, really a full year where he's been the man. You got some time? Bring in a Cam Newton back for a year. Bring in a Ryan Fitzpatrick for a year, then I could see that happening. But again, no, I only see it happening because I don't think Saban's going to make a recommendation to Belichick without pulling his heart away and being realistic. So if they don't draft Mac Jones, the Patriots, because they need a quarterback, they need a franchise quarterback, they need a young quarterback. If they don't draft Mac Jones and they have a chance to, I'd say that was Saban. So and then now Bill O'Brien's on campus, so he's probably helping out with pro days and whatnot. So he's seen a little, and I'm not 100% sure that Belichick and Bill O'Brien are best buds right now anyway, but I will say I'm guessing that going back to the hiring of Bill O'Brien, Saban absolutely called Belichick and said, "What do you think?" Yeah, I'd hire him. I haven't talked to him in a year, but I'd hire him. Yes. But the Patriots have an affinity for Alabama players. It used to be Michigan and Ohio State. Michigan is a big Belichick school. And look, he's got two linebackers, a defensive end and a linebacker, both from Michigan over the last 2 years. So, look, I've been pushing Mac Jones. I think he showed something, but my only worry is I don't think he's ready. And they can't afford a 6-10 season. It's the Patriots, for one. They had their 6-9 season. It was 7-9 last year, and so they got to win. And as opposed to, as I said, a team like the Colts, who now get Wentz, and he's an interesting topic. All of a sudden, you got to consider them. You better consider them for an AFC Conference Championship contending spot.
I think the Wentz move to me is fascinating. I don't know that I can find a real close parallel to this any other time in the NFL, where you had a guy who was playing as well as he was in 2017, went through the injuries, still a top half of the league kind of guy in 2018 and 2019, falls off the way he does in 2020. He's only 28 years old. The Eagles are giving up on him. It feels like this thing could go so many different ways. It could be really good for the Colts if he turns out well, and that would be bad for the Eagles. It could be really bad for the Colts and good for the Eagles if he collapses again. What's your take on Carson Wentz?
So here's the deal. I'm not a big Carson Wentz guy, but I was down there 2 years ago when the Patriots beat them on a Sunday night, and he's my issue with him is, again, I don't want to. It's too easy to say flat out decision making, but he seems to give up early and then start taking off, and that tells me that his head's not right. It looked like his first 2 years that we had a great quarterback, a franchise quarterback. Wasn't there yet, but heading in that direction. So here's what I'll say. The Colts are going to live and die with this decision. These decisions are risky. It's like drafting a quarterback in the first round and then starting him. You'll get fired. If he's lousy, you're going to get fired. If he's good, you're going to get that second contract as a coach. You're going to go 4 more years. So Carson Wentz holds all the cards for everybody. What I will say is he's offensive coordinator, really liked him. They had a great relationship. In the end, Doug Peterson and Wentz didn't have a great relationship. But look, Carson Wentz didn't play well the last 2 years. So we can't make believe, well, he had some really good games and some bad games. He was mediocre with some really bad games. He can make some passes. He's a very good athlete. He's athletic. He can run. My problem is I think he focused on running because his passing was down. But then again, they didn't have some weapons there. So this is like horse racing. You're betting. You really don't know. These horses are coming from all different classes, and they're going to run, and you're sort of guessing. And we're guessing with Wentz. It's worth a gamble. If you want to compete for championships, you got to take chances once in a while. That's why I like the decision.
I feel like it's a big bet on Frank Reich, and I know that's a guy that you're really high on as a coach. And I think it's all about the belief that Frank Reich can get that mental side fixed and that the physical gifts are there. We'll see how it turns out.
He needs weapons too, and I think he's got some of them. I think what you're going to see is, and we're going to see, does a wide receiver, and when I say does a wide receiver, if they'll pay the wide receiver, he'll believe in Carson Wentz. So it's going to be interesting. They get another top flight wide receiver. You see what Tampa did. I'm not saying they're Tampa because I do like, again, in retrospect, they're not as talented maybe as the Tampa weapons are, but they're going to play the same kind of football, a little ball control. That's what I like about Frank Reich. He's a quarterback coach, legendary, has played in legendary games, but he's a meat and potatoes football guy. He's into offensive line. He's into running the football, controlling the clock. Again, I like him, but he's got to prove himself now. Now we're entering third and fourth year. I can like guys. It's very easy, and I've said this before. It's very easy to go 7-9 to 10-6. it's very difficult to go 10-6 to 12-4 contending for AFC championships, NFC championships, and Super Bowls. So that's what we're going to find out. But in my opinion, the Colts had to do something, and this is worth the risk because he does have potential.
Yep, no, I agree 100%. They had to make a move at the most important position of the game, and they made a gamble. And now we'll see. I think the whole season is going to be about Frank Reich and Carson Wentz. We'll see where that heads. Bill, I know there's really no offseason, even when there's no combine.
It's fun.
Free agency before you know it. I know there's plenty to talk about around the corner. I'm sure we'll get to it again next week. Thanks a lot for your time.
Maybe the Patriots next week because we get a couple opportunities there, and I think something's going to break soon on them. So it'll be interesting.
Awesome.
All right. Great stuff.
Thanks a lot, man.
Take care.
Thanks again to Bill. You can follow all the offseason happenings for the New England Patriots at Burt Talk Sports. You can follow me in the Indianapolis Colts at GM Bremer. Thanks again to all of you. We'll talk to you again next week.